Hey, welcome to my YouTube channel, and I am Dr. Reba, the relationship coach. And I really want to thank you to, if you could please like and subscribe and share my videos. I am a therapist and the author of many books, and I talk about different issues on my YouTube channel that can help you in your family, in your marriage, and in your family development. Today, I'm going to be talking about my book, On the Road to Recovery, Breaking the Chains of Addiction. Today I'll be talking about the road to recovery for individuals that's affected by addiction. I'm an addiction therapist, and I always like to give a precursor to how I develop these books that I write, and how I come up with them. And one of the things that I have found is that when in my development of the books, and just in the development of my life as a therapist, I have found that my father was an alcoholic, and as a result of that, I really believe that that life led me to become an addiction therapist, and I understand addiction. And I'm licensed in Florida, and I understand the process of addiction. I studied sex addiction in graduate school, and I understand different types of addictions, whether they're gambling addictions, sex addictions, substance abuse addictions in youth as well as adults. And so I understand how the family, how that such addictions can really affect the family dynamics. It really, in my family, I'm very transparent as a therapist and very open and honest about what I do and what I've come through and what God has brought me through, because that's my level of faith. I understand that whether it's a gambling addiction, a sex addiction, or an alcohol or substance abuse addiction, there's a family breakdown where you lose your home, you get a divorce. My parents got a divorce as a result of my father's addiction. And so I understand how the family dynamics can be very, very, it can really break up your family. Addictions can. So I'm going to talk about that today. Addictions and helping you in recovery. Addictions impact. Florida at one time was known as the oh my God, the capital of us. I wrote the book. I also wrote the book. Shout out to Dr. Akins, Dr. Akins, a friend of mine. We wrote the book. We wrote this book together. He's a addiction specialist as well as an OBGYN, and he was treating women that were addicted to drugs and alcohol and that were taking Suboxone because they were pregnant. So he and I worked together and developed this book, and I was doing the addiction part. And so it's really a good book. It can really help you and your family to understand not only addiction, but the mental health associated with the addictions. And we'll talk about that. Individuals that have addictions, we found that they can have co-occurring disorders. That means you can have two psychological disorders at the same time, which means you can have bipolar, you can have anxiety disorder, history of suicide attempts, personality disorders, and other addictive disorders, impulsive disorders. You could have been compulsive disorders, as well as ADHD, attention deficit. Uh, Hyperactivity disorder that I've seen when I work with youth, that they had OCD as well as ADHD as well as bipolar. And so please understand that genetics play a real important part in your development, right? Um, if you know that you have a genetic, you're predisposed to addiction or mental health disorders because of what is in your family of origin and what is in your family, it's important to be mindful on if you have addiction in your family, that that you uh, you might not be a person that can drink. Some people can't, some people cannot drink. Some people have one drink and they have to have the whole fifth. Other people can drink and it doesn't bother them, but it's important to be mindful of the addictions that are in your family, and that those addictions and how they can have destructive paths. And I encourage parents, if your parents or your grandparents had addictions in their family, that it's important to educate your children on what is your family makeup when it comes to mental health, as well as when it comes to addictions, so that they will be aware of these addictions. I encourage 12-step programs for people. I do. I'm an advocate. I attended adult children of alcoholics, and I encourage really churches to have some kind of support group for those that are addicted to substance abuse or have gambling addictions or sexual addictions. I think support groups are really good for people. Unfortunately, in these groups, you have unhealthy people that don't maintain the that disclose the identity of those in the groups, and that is one of the issues with these kinds of support groups, because they should be a safe place that clients or participants can really share their struggles, and not be judged for the struggles that they have, because we all have struggles in some forms of our life, whether we have chosen to go get help from them or not. But we still have struggles, right? Because everybody has something going on, whether they go get therapy or not, but there's always something going on in our lives, right? So addictions can have whatever addiction there can have a profound impact on the family. Often it's strange and it's turmoil within the family dynamics. I mean, it can cause divorce, it can cause family distress, financial issues, infidelity can occur, whether it's pornography or being these things are important to understand with that it can have such a dynamic effect on your family makeup, in your marriage, in your family. So it's important to try to get some help. And I'm going to be talking about the road to recover for individuals affection by whatever addictions that you have, excuse me. All right, in your family. uh, marriage can be a catalyst to help you in your recovery. I mean, marriage can really help you in the process of recovering, right? Because it can be a support system for you, and so it's important to understand that marriage can be a great support system for you. I mean, and it's important to realize that fostering a support group and an understanding environment, couples can navigate through those challenges that they will experience in recovery for addictions, whether it's sex addiction, gambling addiction, or substance abuse addictions. Any addictions in recovery process would require some support, a non-judgmental support and understanding that addiction is a disease. And I talk about this in the book. It's a disease that affects the brain, and I hope I'll have time to touch on that. Journey to recovery, can both partners acknowledge the presence of the addiction? And to be honest, it's important to, when you have a marriage, that you be honest with, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with pornography. I'm struggling with gambling, and I'm taking our money and I'm going to a gambling casino, or I'm smoking weed, or I'm snorting cocaine, or I'm doing heroin. Whatever the issues are, it's important to be tried. It's important to be honest. Because that's the only way you're really going to have recovery. First thing is that in recovery, is I use this 12 steps as a process. Admit that you're powerless over drugs and alcohol or sex, and that you're hypersexual, or that you are hypersexual, or you're addicted to a substance, or let me just say this, what I was going to say, that you're either hypersexual, or you are a sex addict, and you have a compulsive sexual behavior. And those are very important when you start talking about addictions, and sexual addictions anyway. And I wanted to just stress that. But understand this, that when you have some form of addiction, normally there is some psychological issues that accompany those addictions. And so therefore, I would encourage some therapy to help you process through the addiction process. Okay. Um, so we talked about, to be open and honest in communication with your spouse is important to understand that. That's important. These are my notes from my book, and I want to talk about the effects on the brain as well, because every addiction affects your children, your family function, your finances, your self-esteem, your feeling of self-confidence, the guilt, the shame, all the things that comes with trying to sneak and get drugs, or trying to sneak, and your wife's in the bed and you're in the other room, watching porn, or you're sneaking off to go You're sneaking off to go get high and snort cocaine, or whatever your addiction is, or gambling, and you're spending the money that should be for the mortgage and your car. So it's an understanding that addiction is a family disease, and it doesn't only affect you, but it affects your family and your children as well. And oftentimes people think that they are hiding the addiction, but people know eventually. They'll figure it out, and it'll come out eventually. All right. So recovery. It requires commitment. That's the first thing that requires recovery. Requires commitment and building of trust, and fostering emotional intimacy in your marriage as you establishing healthy boundaries in the process of recovering from any addiction, whatever that addiction might be. So it's important to rebuild trust, because the trust has been broken in the process of recovery. You have violated. We talked about this on one of my other YouTubes. You violated a covenant or an agreement, or in your marriage, and so it's important to understand that trust must be rebuilt, and setting boundaries and being accountable, and all of these are really necessary in the process of recovery, right? And so couples must be willing to confront the underlying issues and get to the root of the problem. Like, I think I've always said this, that substance abuse or any addiction, there's a root. That's the symptom, but there's a root to why you do what you do. And I think when you get to that place of realizing, finding out what the root is to the problem, then you can start working on the recovery process. And that takes being honest. And honesty in recovery is painful. I mean, it's a painful process to realize that, I got issues, but everybody has issues. And it's not about you having issues. It's about, are you willing to work on the issues to become emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, financially healthy as an adult, right? Because everybody has something they're working on, right? So, but through therapy and counseling, couples can gain insight. And as a therapist, I recommended that, and a support group. I also recommend Al Anon. I think we talked about, I don't know, Al Anon is a great substance support group for wives and husbands that have loved ones that are addicted. Also, there's a Christian. Um, 12-step program. I can't think of it at the moment. Um, that Celebrate Recovery. Thank you. That can help you in the process of recovery, and from a Christian perspective, because all recovery requires some spirituality, whether you believe in God, or you believe in nature. I mean, personally, I believe in God, but whatever it takes for you to have a higher power, because if you could deliver yourself, you would be delivered, right? So it's important to understand that you need a higher power, somebody, a power greater than your own self will, because you are unable to do it on your own, right? So it's important to understand that you need a spiritual support and spirituality to help you in the process in your recovery. Therapy can help in gaining insight and develop effective strategies and principles to help you overcome a process through the journey of recovery. Recovery is a lifetime process. It's just not something you go through and you get over. It's a lifetime. It's a lifetime process of recovering from whatever it is, if it's overeating or eating disorders or addictions. It's a life. It's not temporary. It's a life. It's the 12 steps says practice these principles in all your daily affairs. So recovery is a lifetime process. Yes, it's a lifetime process, right? Helping you to realize that, okay, I've got to work on this every day. Family involvement is crucial in recovery. Involving your children, it's important to talk to them about the addiction, and get some support for them and help them to understand that it's not their fault. When divorce occurs, I talk about this in one of my books, the psychological effects that divorce has on children. It's important for them to know that because of their parents' addiction, and addiction is a family disease. Um, I do believe that as an addiction specialist, that it is a family disease, especially substance abuse. It is a family disease. So it's important to talk with your children about that, to help them to understand that it's not their fault. But we do have we're genetically predisposed, because your mother, your grandmother, your grandfather had this addiction. And therefore, because of the genetics of substance abuse, you therefore have that addiction as well. So it's important to convey that to your children, so that they don't don't feel like it's their fault, because kids have a tendency to think it's their fault that things happen. So it's important to make them feel comfortable in the process, in the recovery process. Not only does family involved in therapy helps, but it also helps to repair damage caused by the addiction. Understand that there was damage going to be caused by the addiction, whether financial, emotional, because infidelity does occur in addictions, where you're cheating, with sex addictions or compulsive sex disorder, where you have these sexual cravings, and these kinds of things, and you don't talk to your spouse about them. I think it's important. I'm very personal about honesty and integrity, and being transparent. I think people don't know what you think, and they're not mind readers, and it's unfair to not, be able to communicate what's going on with you and helping people understand this is what I'm struggling with, you know, and pray that they understand and they're supportive in that process. Okay. All right. I'm here. All right. So, family therapy involved in family can help in the process of addictions. Okay, addictions can be devastating within a marriage, um, but it is not unsurmountable. It's something that can be managed through therapy, through understanding, with open communication, professional guidance. Couple can embark on a journey to recovery together. So you can recover from addictions, whether they're sexual addictions, substance abuse, whether they're gambling addictions. You can overcome them, and we'll go through each of them in detail. A growing number of people today are find themselves now addicted to pornography and gambling. Um, it's important to get a handle, and to be able to identify with it. Many of these addictions are linked to substance abuse, because most people that have addictions, it's not like one addiction, right? Because if you're gambling addiction, then you're drinking. So you have a substance abuse. You can have a substance abuse addiction as well. But please recall that I said with any addiction, there's normally a co-occurring disorder of some psychological disorder or mental health disorder associated with, whether it's a sex addiction, gambling addiction, substance abuse, that is associated with the disorder. So it's important to understand that. Indicate a history of suicide, mood disorders, bipolar, anxiety disorder, other addictive behaviors, impulsive, controlling disorders. You want to control, ADHD and impulsive, obsessive compulsive disorders. All of these can be accompanied, and normally are, with addiction. There's always a mental health component to the addictions. Okay. And we found that and research supports what I say, and I have written it in the book as an addiction specialist and therapist. Okay. They do cause problems in your life with addictions. They can cause family dysfunction, family breakup, financial losses. So it's important to understand the different types of addictions, and there should be no confusions about those addictions. Addiction to gambling, we'll talk about addiction to gambling. It's important to uh, so with addictions to gambling, there is a chemical process in the brain that occurs. I wanted to talk about that because there is a chemical imbalance in the brain that does affect. I think I put it in my book. It does affect addiction. The chemical imbalance and the dopamine in your brain, and I do want to talk about that. I think, yeah, it's on page 39, and I want to talk about that because I want you to help you to understand that that drugs affect how messages are sent and received. And interpreted. The brain is divided into central nervous systems and peripheral nervous systems, and I have this in my book. All right, and it's considered spinal cord is considered the old brain in the human brain, and animals have one. Understanding the effects of psychoactive drugs on the brain can increase awareness and minimize relapse. So it's important in recovery to understand that this is a brain disease. The pathway, there's two pathways. There's a switch on and a more and an off. And I talked about this before about the thought. I think I talked about it. Uh, thought, stop thought, and reframing thought. I think I said that in one of my other discussions. And so I want to talk about that. Drug activities or any addiction, it's a brain tells you, well, drugs, it tells you more. The drug activity activates the brain and tells it to do more and stop. And The stop switch signals when the cravings has been fulfilled. One thing about addiction is that no matter you can get high, you can never go back and get that same euphoric high that you had, no matter how much crack you smoke, no matter how cocaine you snort, no matter what you do. You can never get that euphoric. Ooh, that just it's one good time. But the brain tells you keep trying, and that's how overdose occurs, right? Um, Memories of those euphoric feelings are strongly impacted. Addictive use of substance and alcohol, drugs and alcohol, are consumed over periods of time, affect the memory as well as the emotions. Drug affects the brain stem, the limbic system, and cerebral cortex. The brain communicates with billions of neurons, and every cell passes information messages back and forth in different structures of the brain in the spinal column and peripheral nervous system. I think it's important. The brain rewards the dopamine pathway, and the brain circuits are important for natural rewards such as music, sex, and food. It's important to understand the brain, how the brain is affected by substance abuse. So I really want you to get the book, or I get the book to help you to understand how drugs and substance abuse does affect your brain. An addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing brain disease, whether it is addiction to drugs or alcohol or sex. It is a brain. There is something going on in your brain that causes the compulsiveness of sex and drugs and alcohol. And despite the harmful consequences that we know logically that it occurs, but it does affect the brain and it feels good. And so, because it feels good and it meets some pleasure syndrome within our brain, people continue to use drugs and alcohol or addictions, even though they're harmful to them. So some of these people, the brain tells them gambling triggers the pleasure reward and reward center in the brain, which releases a flood of dopamine. And understand that dopamine is what makes you feel good, right? It feels good to the brain when releases a flood of dopamine, makes you feel good, and it's a substance. So general addiction theory states over time that the release of dopamine becomes addictive and the individual will seek it out. So that's what's happening with addiction. It's in your brain. You want more sex. You want more alcohol. You want more drugs. You whatever the compulsiveness of the behavior is, you want more. You want more. You want more. It's just never enough. It's never enough, right? And so, regardless of the consequences, it's never enough. And that's why you have people who drink alcohol, they get DUIs, or they get gambling and they lose all their money and they lose their job because the compulsiveness of the addiction just drives them from their brain. Understanding? Gambling is also a high risk behavior because with gambling comes infidelity. Now because addiction is addiction. It's not like it just stops with a gambling addiction. It moves to sex addiction and then it moves to substance abuse, and then you're getting high and you're drinking while you're gambling, and now before you know it, you have a substance abuse issue uh, because of the addictions to the drugs, right? Sex addiction, to talk about that, is an intense focus on sexual fantasies and urges. So you're addicted to sex, and so you have these fantasies and these urges that you don't openly communicate with your spouse, and these desires, and they can't be controlled, and they cause distress and harm to your health, relationship, and your career. And so you don't believe that it does, but it does have a psychological effect on your functioning as a human being. It does. Sex addiction is the most common layer that leads to the of the compulsive sexual behavior, and it's a problematic in sexual behavior because once you continue to masturbate and continue with pornography, not standard or relational or heterosexual or monogamy doesn't become as pleasurable because you're still trying to fulfill a fantasy that you've seen two other people conduct uh, on a screen. So you're trying to fulfill that because that's what compulsive behaviors do. You'll never be able to feel that fantasy because it's a compulsiveness in your brain. Hypersexuality, hypersexual disorder, sexual compulsive or sexual impulsivity that causes one to go out. Rather, it doesn't matter what your position is. You could be a teacher, pastor, we talked, police officer. It doesn't really matter. Compulsive behaviors are compulsive behaviors, and it's not a respecter of your position or your title or what position you hold. It's a compulsive behavior that can be dealt with. Um, with addiction. So addiction recovery. So it's a process. Substance abuse. We talked about the gambling addiction. We talked about sex addiction, substance abuse, drug addiction. We talked about the dopamine in the brain and how that it controls your behavior. So recovery in all these addictions. It's time and it takes time and it's a process of restoration, right? While this often leads to positive growth, it can be a process and it can be draining. It can be overwhelming to realize that you have a sexual addiction, you have a gambling addiction, you have a drug addiction, or substance abuse addiction, or alcoholism. Um, in the process of recovery, it is encouraged that you seek spirituality, not religion, but spirituality. Find a higher power that is greater than yourself. I personally believe in Jesus Christ and God is my higher power. But people do meditation and they go to nature, and so it has to be something greater than you to help you through the process of recovery. Because if you could do it on your own, you would have done it. And so I think it's important to be honest that that's the first step, admitting that you're powerless over drugs and alcohol in your life is unmanageable, right? It's like admitting and came to believe the second step of any 12-step recovery is came to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity, which means once we have these behaviors, that is insane. If we do the same thing expecting different results, we call that insanity. You Behavior doesn't change without some intervention, without some new information. New information helps us to make better decisions. So in the process of recovery, we get new information on how to stop thoughts and how to reprogram our thinking. We talked about eye gates and ear gates. You have to watch what you see, what you watch. You also have to watch. I talk about in the book about relapse and triggers and how important they are to ensure that you stay addictive free. So you have to monitor what you watch on television, the songs that you hear that can trigger old behaviors and to move you back into old thoughts, take you back to old behaviors. So it's a life process of recovery. So spirituality can help you in your recovery from addiction. They really can, and it can help no matter what it is, it can help you in the process, right? I recommended 12-step recovery programs. They have alcoholic addiction, Alcoholic Anonymous. They have a gambling addiction. They have a sex addiction. As I said, I studied sex addiction in graduate school, and I found it to be all the credentials I have, I should have got my sex addiction degree, but I got the information, and that's enough to help me. And I've helped many clients process through understanding sexual compulsive disorders, sexual addiction, hypersexual activity. It's not normal, but it can be managed through understanding, right? Um, the central ideal to any recovery program, and I encourage churches and pastors to get a support group to help people that are processing, and do the best you can to make it a safe and secure place, because as we know, people gossip because of behaviors, and so it's important to develop some kind of support group that's safe for people to be able to share. What they're going through and get some help in the process, and they're on their road to recovery from addiction, right? I talk about a higher power, so it's important to have a higher power to whom I choose to call God and Jesus Christ in my life. Spirituality, not religion. I'm not talking about going to a church. I'm talking about having a personal relationship with the God of your understanding, and I call him Jesus and God, and having that personal relationship with him by knowing and believing and trusting that he will see you through because he loves you, he cares for you, he's going to help you through it. You're going to be okay. It's really trusting in a higher power greater than yourself, because if you could do it, you would have done it. And so it's getting to the place of humility of saying, okay, I am not handling this addiction well. Whether it's gambling, whether it's sex, or it's drugs or alcohol, I'm not doing this well. And I'm going to need some intervention. And I'm going to need a therapist or a pastoral counselor. I'm going to need to talk to somebody to help me recover in this addiction. Okay. So we're not talking about religion, we're talking about spirituality. And when I talk about spirituality, I'm talking about really being sensitive to the Holy Spirit within you, the God in you, right? The Holy Spirit in you that can quicken you and say, that's not a good thought. Before you act on something, you have a thought. And it's learning how, I love the scripture, as a man thinketh, so is he. It's learning how to control your thought life, right? And learning how to be a healthy individual, being emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically healthy. It's relative to you being a whole person and the person that God created created you to be is a healthy person. And that takes work. It takes being honest. It takes getting therapy. It takes working on you, being the best you could be. The benefits of a personal life and addiction, because spirituality can benefit our lives when we rely on God and we rely on a higher power to that we can lean on, that we can pray to, that we can trust in. And as we do the work, we allow the God of our understanding to do His work and His job as well, right? We allow the God of our understanding to lead and guide us into going to meetings and going into prayer meetings and whatever it takes to get us and finding someone that we can go to trust, to pray with us and to talk us through it, who won't judge us, right? Because what happens with judgment is shame and guilt. But it's so important just to find someone that you can trust in and be honest with to help you in your recovery process. It's important. When people tap into their spirituality, you find yourself focused away from the addictions and more on becoming more spiritual, more enlightened, more at peace with where you are in life. So I think it's important in recovery to tap into that spiritual part of who you are, because I believe we're created as spiritual beings and we're having human experiences. So it's important to tap into that part of our lives, right? Spirituality and addiction recovery are a natural fit for each other, right? Because I believe God created us. God is a spirit, and I believe we have the spirit of God in us. And I believe that if we tap into that spirituality through prayer, through meditation, through worship, uh, through reading the Word of God, through reading spiritual books that enlighten us, that encourage us, I think we can move to becoming healthy. The scripture says, "Will thou be made whole?" And I believe that God wants us to be made whole, right? He said, Jesus said, I came to set the captives free. And it's not enough to be healed. I think healing is a part of that, but it's because healing is like one area. I'd like to be healed in all areas of my life, financially, sexually, emotionally, psychologically, physically, and then I am whole. So so listen, and it's a lifelong process, because once we're healed in one area, then life and God presents us with something else that helps us to say, now you need to work on this. And then before you know, you're always going to be working on character development, integrity, working on being the best you can be, to bring glory to the kingdom of God. So it's a lifelong process, as recovery is a lifelong process, right? Healing from addiction can be a challenging process because it's painful. I'd love to tell you that recovery is an easy process, but it's painful because you're being honest with yourself. And when you're being honest with yourself, it doesn't look too good. And some of the raunchy things you've done in your addiction, I've often said to when I do counseling with women who've been prostitutes, and or males who've been prostitute for addiction, it doesn't mean that you're a prostitute. It means that you did some things in order to meet the addiction. You understand that? I'm going to say that again. Because you sold your body, because you did some behavioral things that were, for the addiction, it doesn't mean you're a prostitute. It doesn't mean you're no good. It means you have an addiction and you did some things that weren't so well to meet the addiction. So it's important because people have a tendency to own that behavior in the addiction, but it's the addiction that causes one to do certain things in order to meet the addiction. So it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means the disease caused you to behave in a manner that you would not have behaved if you were not addicted to drugs or alcohol or gambling or sex, right? You just wouldn't have done it if you didn't have the addiction. So it's important to understand it and cut yourself some grace by realizing the addiction mold and shaped your behavior, right? So healing involves forgiveness. The spiritual process of healing does require forgiving. But here's the biggest thing that I found in recovery: people forgiving themselves for the things they've done, because you've done some things that if God was to put it on a screen, you'd be trying to tip out of earth, because it wasn't so good, right? And nobody's seen it, but you did it. So it's important to forgive yourself. I mean, to thine own self be true. Forgive yourself for the things you've done in the addiction. Forgive yourself for the things you've done to the people that you've hurt, that you betrayed, that whose trust you broke. Forgive yourself for just forgiving yourself is key, and forgiving others, and asking others to forgive you for the trauma that you caused them, for the discomfort and the disruption that you've caused for their lives. So it's important to understand that forgiveness is the major thing in the process of recovering. But there will always be triggers in your brain, because it's a brain disease that will keep bringing it up, and you have to continue to cast it down with new information that you know that you're healed and you're in the process of recovery. And it's a process, and it's a day by day process. I mean, even Jesus only promised us, give us, God says, give us this day our daily bread. Life is only promised one day at a time. I mean, God was clear to say, boast not on tomorrow, for you know not what a day brings. I think it's important in recovery to just take it one day at a time. If one day gets to be too much, it's 1 hour, right? But keep it simple. You know, it's called KISS. Keep it super simple. Keep your life as simple as possible, and the simplicity will remove the stress that will eliminate or minimize the triggers that will cause you to behave, to give way to the addiction. All right. So, uh, also, I recommend in the spiritual process is journaling. It's important to journal, right? Journaling helps you write out your feelings. I mean, write out the thoughts, write out how you're feeling. I feel like I want to, go have sex with a hooker today. Write it out. I feel like I want to smoke a blunt today. I feel like I want to snort some cocaine. I feel like I want to do something. So it's important to write it out, because if you don't, writing it out, journaling helps you to get out what's inside, because what's inside comes out. It could come out overtly or covertly, but it comes out. It can come out positively or negatively. So journaling helps you to is a healthy method of releasing what's inside, and so you can see what's inside, right? And you don't, and it helps you not to act on the internal feelings that you have with addictions, right? So write down your thoughts and your feeling on a piece of paper and express these things privately. All right. So it's important for you to write them down, because you're the one that's dealing with the addictions, right? The early stages of recovery are mentally and emotionally exhausting, because you're trying to fight this demon on the inside of you that wants to have sex with strangers, or prostitution, sex, or male on male sex, or sex with strangers, or sex with prostitutes, or use drugs or alcohol, or gamble, go to the casino and gamble all your money away. It's a process, and it's a mental process as well, because you're working on your thinking, and you're working on your mind. And we understand, I've taught you today, that it's a brain disease. So it's a process. It's not an easy process, but it's a process. So it's important to understand that, right? That's a process. All right. Meditation is one thing that can keep spirituality to help you in the process of recovery. It's being spiritual, right? Meditating on good things. What other things are true? What other things are positive? I think thinking on positive things can help you in your recovery, right? So it's important to understand that. I mean, yoga. I mean, just relaxing, just meditating, right? Um, Being grateful is one of the things in spirituality. Being grateful because it could have been worse, right? Oftentimes, we're just not grateful enough for what we have and what could have been. It could have been bad. It could have been worse, right? And so being grateful that God allowed you to stop before it got real bad, right? That there was something that happened in your life, that God can take lemon and make lemonade, right? He can take mess out of our lives and make us a messenger, and make our lives a message for other people to understand the process of recovery. Gratitude is the most important in recovery. Being grateful for our lives, and that it could have been worse, and you could have been dead, and you could have been exposed, or you could have been. So, I mean, the attitude of gratitude is just so powerful to be. I often say I'm more thankful, I'm grateful, and I'm blessed. I'm just so grateful, because it could have been worse. It could have been worse. While much about addiction recovery can be emotionally upsetting, because it's your emotions, it's your feelings. One day you'll feel happy, one day you'll feel sad, one day you'll feel glad, one day you feel depressed. But emotions are subject to change. His mercies are new every morning, so it doesn't mean you're going to feel. If you stay, life is like a roller coaster, right? Today you feel sad. If you stay on the roller coaster, tomorrow you'll feel glad. It's just staying on there, and not giving way to suicide and suicide ideations, thoughts. And I encourage people, if you're having suicide ideations and suicide thoughts, and if there's a plan, then I encourage you to call the 1-800 suicide hotline in order to get some intervention and get some help. Finding purpose is the key to recovery, right? Finding, feeling lost, like finding your purpose. I mean, what do you enjoy doing? What gives you a sense of purpose? I mean, and finding that sense of purpose, and purpose usually involves helping other people and encouraging other people to be the best person they can be. In life, after addiction is the most important thing you can do, helping others. I found people that have been addicted to drugs and alcohol go back and work at drug recovery centers as peer support specialists to help other people that have been addicted to drugs, or sex addictions, or starting support groups in their church, because now they're healed and they're whole and they're helping others. And I think one of the best ways you can stay healed and whole is to give back to your community, your support group, and continue to support others in their recovery. It keeps you sober. It keeps you not practicing the immoralities and the things that you would do in your addiction. So finding purpose is key. Again, spirituality encourages you to focus on being the best you and not on the addiction. So that's important. Connection with a power, a powerful, the power greater than yourself during addiction recovery and support can make a huge difference in an individual's life, right? Finding that support, finding that thing in life that makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, as I say, makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, right? Makes you feel good about you and feel that you're making a difference in the lives of other people. So it's important to have that. Spirituality encourages connection with others to restore a sense of belonging, right? Prayer is one of the main things you can do to help you in your recovery. A prayer style is a choice. Doesn't matter if you're sitting, standing, or kneeling, but pray. Pray for God's help to help you in your addiction and recovery. All right. Uh, and so addiction can be devastating. We talked about that. Spirituality plays a really important, significant part. We talked about that from my book. We talked about the benefits in a person's life. Addiction can be crippling to a person in the sense of value. It can bring shame and it can bring guilt. It really can. But uh, I think it's important to promote healing by journaling. I do. I said that. I think it's really important to that you promote healing by journaling your thoughts and journaling your fears and your concerns. Right? Strength. We talked about being grateful for the things and having a meaningful connection with the God of your understanding. Um, Connection and power for doing addiction and support can have a huge addiction, make a huge difference in your life, in your recovery. I do want to talk about one other thing in my book. All right, so I want to talk about this, and I wanted to talk about relapse and recovery because it's important to identify relapsing and when you're in the process of recovery from addictions, the pathway to recovery. Right, and I'm teaching today from my book. Right, addiction and recovery. Right. Okay. Um, uh, uh, Okay. So recovery is an ongoing process, and recovery is an ongoing, and recovery couples and families, like families, experience times of chaos and times of crisis because of addictions. So it's an important thing for couples and grandparents and everybody to be involved in the recovery process. But it's important to make sure you're building. We talk about family and recovery, and recovery rituals and family strengthens. I have this in the book for individuals that are married. Have a date night to rebuild your trust. Have game nights to build with your family. Inside, outside voices. Learn how to communicate appropriately. If you're in the house, you're communicating with a voice tone that is inside voices. Outside, if you're yelling and screaming, you should be outside, right? Movie night. Have movie night for your family and your kids because it's a family disease. It's not only you. Birthday cakes. Make a birthday cake for you and your kids. You guys are having birthdays. Go to church together. Have spirituality. Work on your children, rewarding your children for good grades, of going through this, or having cook night where your family cooks. The bike rides and family nights together. These are things that help families in recovery because this is not an individual disease. This is a family disease that affects everybody within the family. Dr. Arkin suggests that professional and functional addictions can do well with the following if you're on medication management, he recommends that. He also recommends a psychiatrist and a psychologist to help you with medication management. He also recommends a social worker, or a pastoral counselor, or a therapist, somebody to help you in the process. He's NA is good, or private psychologist can help you, or pastoral counselor can help you to avoid the relapses that can come uh, in your life. But it's important to talk about triggers, is that identifying the triggers, as indicated before, when you're in recovery, this book can help you. I'm teaching today from On the Roads to Recovery, helping families with addictions and mental health. You can't cure it. You can't control the addiction, and you can't cure it alone. So I really encourage support in your addiction. But I would say, remember that within addiction, there are triggers, brother. So you have to stay away from people, places, and things, right? When you're trying to recover and trying to heal, you're running for your life, because it is your life. So you're staying away from people that cause you to be dysfunctional, cause you to go back to old behaviors. Listen, if I'm not smoking crack, I don't have friends who smoke crack. I'm not gambling. I don't have friends who go to the casino. And it's that those are hard things, because then you have to find new friends and new friends to associate with. So in relapse, it's important to identify new friends. Now you have new desires. You're developing new desires, new tastes, and sexual additions. You're working with your partner and working through your sexual additions and being honest with them and trying to develop a healthy sexual relations with your spouse that doesn't include pornography or orgies or other things that are that are not biblical and not Christian like, right? So, and also with those triggers is watching the music that you listen to, because those musics can bring a trigger and move you back to the club, to the club life, or move you back into the casino, or move you back into the sexual addiction or the alcohol, the drug addiction of that life. So it's important to understand, to be identifying with those triggers so that you don't relapse on your road to recovery. Listen, I am Dr. Reba. Please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Listen, get the book, On the Road to Recovery, Breaking the Chains of Addictions, and understanding that you're not alone. You can't cure it, you can't control it, and you can't do it alone. So it's important to seek professional help in that, right? And you can do that with help, contacting a therapist, a pastoral counselor, and finding somebody you trust and that you can talk to about your sexual addictions, your substance abuse addictions, your gambling addictions, your eating addictions, whatever they are. All right, you can do it, right? All right, thank you so much for watching my YouTube channel. Please share, like, and subscribe, and support I have a Cash App. You're more than welcome to support my channel as I help other people in their addictions and their families. All right, thank you. I'm Dr. Reed, the relationship coach.